started. So, hello, welcome everybody to our most recent SciEngage discussion. My name is Jeff Hunt. I'm one of the organizers, along with Alana Kimbrell and Erica Kimmerling. You can say hello, and Emily Floyd, who's not here, unfortunately, today. Hope everybody's doing well. Thank you all for joining us. This meeting is being recorded, so it'll be posted on our website and on YouTube. We'll also record the chats. Please keep yourself on mute and put any questions in the chat box. And that's the end of my spiel, and I'm going to turn it over to our Master of Ceremonies with the blank white wall, Ben Wiehe.
Do you want me unmuted or muted? Yeah.
Unmuted would be good for now.
Thank you, Jeff, and everyone at AAAS as well, and Erica for putting this together every month. I've joined it before as an audience member, and I'm really pleased to be, part of this crew that's putting this on today. So thank you to everybody who's joined so far. I don't want to take long with an introduction, which is really my only role, I think, but I can't help stealing some time up front, just to help make sure that everybody is with us and with everyone, the other speakers have some context about where we're coming from. Because for the past, well, more than a decade, some of us have focused our professional lives on public science events. There have been many involved projects supporting new kinds of events, regionally, nationally, internationally. We've had now countless in-depth day-long workshops. We've generated white papers, had multi-site, multi-year evaluations. Some of us have been working to get publications into the right journals. We've even started a conference dedicated wholly to public science events called the Science Events Summit, which is meeting in Atlanta next June 1st and June 2nd, except it's canceled along with everything else. If you want to, I'll do a shameless quick plug to say that if you are interested in this sort of conversation, or you think you may be interested in furthering this sort of conversation, go to sciencefestivals.org and you can see a kind of evolving list of some online meetings that will be taking place over the next month because we can't meet with the Science Event Summit. So a lot of effort, energy, and focus around this notion of public science events. There are several reasons why we've kept this focus for so long. And one reason is that by focusing on live, in-person events, we can put support for a craft over support for institutions. And that opens up this broader conversation that's very freeing. For one thing, it keeps the audience experience at the center, or acknowledging that the word audience is fraught. We might better say participant experience. So focusing on live events gives us so much flexibility. Depending on what will work best for the participants, public science events can happen anywhere, at any time, and in so many different formats, with a whole range of production values, easily incorporating any kind of a collaboration. With live events, it's possible to do whatever you need to, whatever is needed to facilitate the best participant experience. But even though they have this incredible flexibility, events also have an immediacy that serves as a real motivator. So there's this ready or not, do it now aspect to events that calls on people. At a certain point, you simply have to stop talking about what you're going to do and take action. And this can be used to push people in positive and reinforcing ways, especially if you're hoping to get people out of their comfort zones, which is, I think, a big part of what this call is about. People will do things in the context of a live event that they would not do otherwise, and they'll enjoy it. Events are also inherently iterative in nature, which is a fancy way of saying that they repeat. But it's more than that, because there's so many variables involved in event production. Every iteration is an opportunity to adapt, incorporate new feedback, find new ways to connect new people, reassess, and tap into that flexibility I mentioned. Some of us take it as incumbent on us to be reinventing every single time in order to incorporate what we learned the last time around. Now, I don't think I have to hammer home the fact that in-person events have a truly special power. I think we all get that pretty viscerally right now. Showing up in person is such a strong statement by an individual and by a community that opens up a whole set of possibilities. There's the possibility to truly see and be seen by others, to share the same air, to commit fully with your body, to occupy the same space, and through everyone's combined presence, you set the tone and norms for that space, for who and what belongs in that space and who and what doesn't belong in that space. So I could go on, but really I just wanted to set the context for this conversation by reminding everyone of some of the reasons why we're here today to discuss that intersection between inclusive practice and public science events. It's a natural and powerful intersection. I think all of us presenting us on this call feel really passionately about that intersection. We're realistic about how entrenched business as usual is, but we're also enthusiastic about the potential events have as levers of change. But it bears bears talking about. So to start off, we'll hear from Stacey Baker and Jonathan Frederick. Both of them have been important voices in our conversations for years, and they both bring the very practical perspective of the event organizer to this call. I see so many friends in the participant list. It's funny to introduce, you all, but I want to make sure everybody has the same context. Stacey Baker is, among other things, a T-Rex costume wearing producer of Family Science Days for the AAAS. This is a big public event that accompanies the AAAS annual meeting, in case you haven't had the chance to see that come to town. She's been working to make that event more inclusive, but it is inherently challenging. And as with most event organizers, she has many constraints she's working under. So I think she's going to talk over some of that with us. Jonathan Frederick is, among other things, the director of the statewide North Carolina Science Festival and a collector of busts for his shelf behind him. He'll be discussing some of the unique opportunities that live events present for community engagement and sharing some stories from the field. So we're going to have Stacey and Jonathan have incredible on-the-ground experience, but have also been part of our conversations for years. We'll take a small break for a chat halfway through, then turn to Karen Peterman and Daniel Aguirre. Karen is, among other things, evaluating diversity and inclusion efforts by festivals participating in the Alliance's Science Festival Accelerator project, and she will discuss some of the measures being developed for that project. Daniel is, among other things, the advisory board chair for the Science Festival Accelerator project, and he's going to comment on that a little bit, and describe his ongoing efforts in modes of community engagement that can serve as the foundation, or should serve as the foundation, for making the most of that intersection between inclusive practice and public science events. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions and comments, but the topics we're touching on today are huge, and they're parts of larger ongoing conversations we're having. So quick reminder, sneak over to sciencefestivals.org if you want to find out how to pursue one of those strands further over the coming months. With that, I'm going to fade in my white background. Take it away, Stacey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. It's really exciting to see a lot of familiar faces and names. It's hard to believe that I've been at this long enough to have familiarity within the group, so I'm really excited. I'm Stacey Baker. So as stated, I work at AAAS for the Center for Public Engagement with Science and Technology. And part of my role there is to organize and run Family Science Days, which is a 2-day public science event that's part of AAAS's annual scientific conference. And so the goals of this particular event are to bring the public to the scientific conference and kind of help bring scientists down from lofty perches and say, here we are, we're all, in the same society, we're all in dialogue with each other. It's also an opportunity for the scientists that attend the conference to see quality public engagement in action, and in some cases actually jump in and happen to participate. The T-Rex costume is very popular among people wanting to jump in and wander around. And so I have a list of challenges, as Ben mentioned, that are very unique to me because of the nature of having a science event that's part of a larger scientific conference. But I also have a list of challenges that are not unique to me and are shared among other science organizers. So this past year, our conference, and therefore Family Science Days, was in Seattle, Washington. We managed to do this in February 2020, so right before everything. And just for reference, our headquarters are actually in Washington, DC. So this was my 4th year organizing Family Science Days, but it was also the 4th unique city that I have been in organizing Family Science Days. And so that's perhaps my largest challenge, is that it's best practice to, when you're hosting events, to get to know the community, to go in, to build these relationships, to build trust with both partners who you're working with, but also potential attendees of your event. And this 4th year was my first year I had a site visit to the city that I was bringing the event to, and not just arriving 2 days before the show went on. So I not only have to build a lot of trust in a very short time, I have to rebuild every single year with a whole different set of exhibitors, partners, and attendees. And so I have to build that connection to the local ecosystem. I have to learn how it works and how my event fits into that. And I also need to, earn that trust. And so every year I really struggle with feeling like an interloper. Like I feel like I ride in on my T-Rex, I have a fun time, and I ride right back out. And so to help reconcile that, I want to act as a matchmaker or an introduction from the local science organizations to the local interested public, and hopefully, introduce them. And then when I leave, I've left something for them to build off of, while inspiring our next generation of scientists and engineers. So I want to say, first and foremost, especially since I am seeing a lot of familiar names, that every city that I come to, the local science networks are phenomenal and welcome and warm and understand everything. And it's just a lot of fun. And so this network is just really powerful and incredible in that way. But we're here to think about inclusion. So, organizing Family Science Days is only a third of my overall job. And I'm the only organizer who works on this from AAAS, which means that I have a limit in my perspective, but I also have a large limitation in my time. So planning challenges that aren't unique to me are financial constraints, venue layouts and specs and things that you have to, think about, and you can't move a pillar. I've tried. And also differing priorities within my organization. And so this past year, I was really inspired by a lot of conversations that happened at the Science Event Summit held in sunny San Diego. Shout out to Julie Fushi for just being phenomenal in that experience. And I started thinking having a sensory-friendly part of Family Science Days. And what this meant was having a time that was tailored to the community that have sensory processing disorders. And I, in these conversations, found out there were some festivals that were already doing something similar. There were some museums that had, thought about this. And so I felt really confident that I could do this for this audience. And so I made the decision in, I think, September, October, and then November, December hit when the quote unquote real planning began. And I realized that I wasn't in the position I thought I was. And the resources that were available to me by this wonderful network needed to be adapted for my needs, and that took time. And so my poor exhibitors kept getting the promise of, you know, this, I'll get it to you, it's coming, don't worry, we're going to do this together. And with the planning doing its normal roller coaster, the part that I definitely wasn't expecting was the overwhelming anxiety of, I had decided to do this thing for this group, and I didn't feel like I was prepared to be that person to do this. And so it was a lot of, what if I do this wrong? What if I'm doing more damage than I'm doing good? What if it doesn't even matter to anybody? And I expressed this to a few friends, and the response that I got was, well, at least you're thinking about a group that most people completely overlook. And that is already a big deal, that you're thinking about this group. Which should have made me feel better, but it actually made me feel worse, because my initial thought was, is that enough? Is it enough to think about a group? Is it enough? And what does that mean about all the groups that I'm not accommodating? What about all the groups that I can't be thinking about? And in many ways, that comes back to those constraints as an event planner that I talked about earlier. So there's financial constraints. So an ASL interpreter costs money, and that money might have to go to the wheelchair ramp to the stage. When I do have extra money, that's a joke, I like to provide transportation and lunch to kids that wouldn't be brought to the event by their parents. And then there's the venue layout. I can't control where the bathrooms are. I can't control if they're locked. I can't control if there's carpet on the floor. I cannot change those sorry, Julie, but there are permanent things that I cannot just bulldoze through. And then there's the differing priorities within my organization. So even though I want to be accommodating to a particular community, their priorities might not be in alignment, and we have to make that decision together about how we're going to accomplish that. And so as much as I'm signaling acceptance as an organizer, and I'm thinking about this as an organizer, there are times that there's things very much outside of our control that undermine all of our careful planning, that can undermine everything we've thought about, and can just, on the surface, look like we just didn't care. And so with that, I will say, be very kind to event planners when they're running around trying to do all these things, and you want to say, oh, the bathroom is locked. It's like, okay, and if you hand me a sledgehammer, I'll fix that for you. But for right now, like, I have these other things I need to be thinking of. And so in the end, I would say that Sensory Friendly Hour was good. There's problems that happen and hiccups that I, as the organizer, would notice that others wouldn't. I would definitely do it again. I think it's now an integral part of the event to continue to do this. And I'm going to think about, the things that I could do better. So the community didn't ask me to do this subset of the event. I chose to do it. And so in the future, I definitely want to have a community partner that helps me think through those things, since, I'm not a member of that particular community. And so I don't want to be that person who walks in and makes those decisions, because I need to think about that. And I also want to think a little bit about, like, as I move around city to city, what more can I learn if I didn't just have a 2-day site visit in the city beforehand? What other communities are not coming to my attention? What other ideas are just not out there quite yet? And who can I think about including? And that is also a place where this incredible community that we're a part of, and I'm seeing 89 participants, which is blowing my mind right now. Like, this is where this community is my family, and the ones who boost me and cheerlead me, but also help me come up with these incredible ideas and pull this off. So thank you. You're the best. I love you all. That's it.
Thank you, Stacey. That was fantastic. I love your plea for generosity. I mean, when we have ideals and we want to adhere to those ideals, but in the end, when an event comes around, it's the product of compromises. I'm gonna just, for the sake of time, run right on over, hand it over to Jonathan.
Hey everybody, thanks Ben. I'm just jumping right in. Thumbs up if you can hear me. Just want to make sure my mic's been a little squirrely of late. Greetings to my basement. Welcome to my basement here in North Durham, North Carolina. I used to be upstairs, but the 3-year-old and 5-year-old became magnets for what I was doing. And then I came down here and they used to be right here. So they're upstairs being engaged. And if you hear some thumping, you'll know why. But I am, in this surreal time, it's really wonderful to see everyone's faces. I hope you're all doing as well as can be, you and yours and those people you trust and love, and that you're taking care of each other. My name's Jonathan Frederick. I am the director of the Science Festival. I work at UNC Chapel Hill's Moorhead Planetarium and Science Center, which is right on campus in Chapel Hill. The center itself thinks a lot about inclusion. We formed an inclusion and diversity committee years ago, and some of you may know my boss, Crystal Harden, who is the head of all of our educational programs and is also our chief diversity officer. And I invited her to be on the call, but she's working on her dissertation right now, so she's pretty busy. But she's an amazing resource, and I encourage you to reach out to her in the future about some of these topics, because she's researching it right now and has some amazing perspectives. But we think a lot about these topics, and we're always evolving and learning. We think about it in terms of our building, which was built in the late 40s and has, wonderful grand architecture with marble columns and Jeffersonian columns that for certain audiences were meant to inspire. And I think for other audiences, they were meant to probably intimidate. So when we think about how we use that space now versus how it was originally designed, we really want to make sure we're welcoming all of the people who can come and visit us. We work through that through our building layout, but also our programs, our staff development, our professional development, and through our mission, which is actually to serve, we think, a lot statewide. We do some national stuff, we do some hyper-local stuff, but we tend to think a lot about the state of North Carolina. So a little bit similar to Stacey, I mean, we are a lot of times thinking about things not on our home court. How can we still be inclusive and welcoming on events where we don't control all of the variables? And we have a lot of challenges that most of you undoubtedly have, this idea of breadth of service versus going really deep into a topic or into an issue. Thinking about our vision and our idealism with the reality, where the rubber meets the road. And it occurs to me, and I actually wrote it down on my notes, that the saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions really comes up when I think about really good ideas that get off the ground and get started. And then as reality timelines, pressures creep in, what ends up happening can sometimes not meet your expectations. The one thing I wanted to point out is I think it's important to really tease out what you mean by community. Community can be described demographically across a large population, but it also can be described geographically, of course, and you know all this, but I think it needs to be said that neighborhood events being inclusive might be different than working with a certain population. And so we struggle with all of this. And as Ben said at the beginning, the beauty of public science events is that they can be somewhat fluid when you work in true partnership in a humble way with people, and when you're listening and being empathetic. I mean, they can be culminating where it's like people work towards something and then it's a celebration at the end of some sort of process. They can be fun, they can be serious, they can be deep dives, they can be superficial, and I mean that in a good way in terms of like samplers. They can be audience or participant driven. They also can be used to highlight experts. And they can be one-offs and it's one and done and you had to be there and sorry you missed it, maybe you catch the next one. Or they can be a series that is iterative, and all of that is great. I wanted to share a specific example about an event that if you look at from a distance, and you look at the photographs we got, you look at the quotes we got, it was a raging success. But I always have this sort of mixed feeling about it. We brought in a STEM educator of some renown into North Carolina. And we wanted to work in a metropolitan area that we weren't totally familiar with. So we wanted to work in Charlotte. We're in the Triangle. We're based in Chapel Hill. We wanted to do this event with a renowned speaker in Charlotte. And we did two that made the most sense. He's a STEM education professional. His name's Chris Emdin. You may have worked with him in the past. We did an event with the school system where he did some professional development with teachers. No brainer. That was easy. Everyone speaks the same language. Everyone knows what he's going to deliver. He knows what he's going to deliver. The audience has their expectations. Boom, boom, boom. Great event. We also wanted him to visit some school that may not get a chance to see someone like that do his thing. And so we had a program at a high school that the school system decided to bring him to. So they selected the school. And I don't use this word often, but that visit was pretty transformational all around. To know that the students had come in sort of unsure of what was going to happen. The teachers were kind of like, all right, and they're busy. They're thinking about probably what they have to do next period or next lesson. They were there. And then he comes in and does just, it was a really good talk. And by the end, the energy was completely different and it was fantastic. But again, that event, same language, everyone knew what was going to happen. Everyone knew what was going to go on. Worked pretty well. I got a little greedy. I figured he's doing something on like a Wednesday afternoon and he's doing something on Thursday morning. Why don't we do something different on Wednesday evening? And I've always wanted to work with faith-based organizations. So we thought, what if we did a program with a metropolitan downtown church? And it was a good idea, well received by partners. We have a decent network in the area. We poked around. We found a church that we thought would work really, really well. They were interested. But, and I'm curious to hear what Karen and Daniel say about this sort of thing. But as I started to get my head around this event and we had all the pieces lined up, I think it was all set to go with one phone call and I made one visit. And that's not enough. That was just not enough to get down there. And it was very, very transactional. The church, the business folks in the church were incredible. They're like, yeah, this sounds great. We'll be happy to promote this to our congregation and to our broader community. You can use this space and this space. And they were super welcoming, but it was a business relationship. We signed a contract. We paid a reasonable fee. They gave us the keys and had told us who the staffer would be there then. We came in night of. We had food for the families that were coming. We had books signed by the presenter. We did the talk in the chapel or cathedral, depending on your frame of reference. And it was beautiful. He gave a great talk. The audience was well received. The audience, we could have had more people. But when it was all said and done, everyone's patting ourselves on the back. We all feel really good about it. The families that came felt really good about it. But I always kind of had sort of a mixed, I felt like we left a lot there. And we have not been back to that church. We haven't followed up with the families. And so it always sticks in my mind as a sort of collaboration that I want to do better. And so since then, you know, I really started almost all of my collaborative events with other folks without a defined product. And I always ask, who else should we be talking to that's not here? Who else do you think we should have at this table? And then we always start with a sort of a statement. I've started to say, like, I don't know what we're going to do here or what this is going to be, but my personal goal is to have everyone involved feel good about what we did and want to do something again afterward. And that's about as specific as I get. And sometimes, you know, relinquishing control can be somewhat frightening, particularly when you have competing agendas. But I always try to go for win-win-wins. Everyone has to get a little used to compromise. I'm not always driving the conversation. And I think that approach has really helped me lead to deeper partnerships across this big geographic area we're trying to serve. And I think one thing that's been really fun is remembering that this for us is not a sprint. Stacey sounds like she has to sprint quite a bit when she's getting into a town and doing something, but this is a marathon. So some things don't pay off right away. And then those community members that we show up and continue to show up with and for help drive where we can help them. And that's been really, really valuable. So I love the idea of keeping a participant-centric approach, but also a collaborative and partner-centric approach, which I think you all know. So I apologize if that's a little anticlimactic, but it's been really, really valuable for me to learn. And I'm really grateful to see everyone and hope you're all doing well. Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was perfect for me. I mean, because I do a lot of work and energy. You put yourself out on the line and your institution, your organization's name out on the line when you do an event. that, especially, that's advertised ahead of time, things like that. You took something of a risk by going to a new venue, but your description of like understanding that, like, okay, people are patting themselves on the back, but there's something missing. I think that's just a essential kind of mode to remain in. It seems like this work, unfortunately, is just never done, right? So that's the at this intersection of inclusive practice and public science events, we have this that theme running through. Like, event, you can finish it, but you got to go, what was the point, what's the follow-up, what's going to happen next? Same with inclusive practice. It's just never something that you achieve in the walk away. I promised questions during the middle of this, but we have a huge we have a lot going on in the chat, and we don't have a whole lot of time. So maybe, and Jeff and I, with Jeff's private permission, I think we'll just pass on that and pivot right to Karen and Daniel. And if we have time at the end, that would be wonderful. There's no way we're going to cover everything going on in the chat, but then you could go to sciencefestivals.org and look at what other kind of conversations are coming up as we continue these conversations going forward. Thank you, Jonathan. Karen, are you ready to jump right on in?
Sure.
Yay.
Yay. Hi, everybody. I want to echo what everyone else has said. It's pretty cool to see this many people in one of these rooms. I've done lots of virtual things, as we all have, in the last weeks, but this may be the largest number of people I've seen come to one thing. And so I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm thrilled that I see maybe an equal number of familiar and unfamiliar names. For those of you that I haven't had the chance to meet with or talk to in the past, I am somebody who has a small evaluation and research shop in Durham, North Carolina. I'm in central Durham compared to Jonathan's northern Durham. And I spend a lot of time thinking about evaluation of public science events and methods that are meaningful in those messy contexts. And I'm going to share some slides in just a couple seconds. What I want to do today is just spend maybe 7 minutes that I was given from Ben. So let me actually set my timer so I keep myself honest. 7. Anyway, I'm going to take a few minutes, and I wanted to start by talking a little bit about evaluation broadly, and then narrow down on the example that Ben mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So I have been thinking a lot about inclusive practice for the last year, especially. I do a lot of evaluation of NSF work, so broadening participation and broader impacts are part of what we always think about, but there was a shift for me about a year ago, and that was due in part to an article that came out in New Directions for Evaluation. That's not what I want you to see. Hang on. That was written by Cecilia Garibay and Rebecca Teasdale. And part of what was kind of this moment for me was the fact that they said evaluators should be actively engaged in this work. And that we should be actively engaged in fostering inclusive practices. We should be helping people think about equity and what our role is as professionals in trying to move toward a more equitable system than the one that we live in. And that was one of those moments where it was an oh moment. It was also a duh moment. Part of what I have appreciated about it and what I think many evaluators appreciate about it is that it was a different level of permission, or not even permission, but like, you should be doing this. There should be an expectation that this is part of what you're talking about, and that you're talking about it loudly and regularly, and people can choose to listen and engage with you, and hopefully they will. I think in relation to where we are right now with COVID-19, if you work with a lot of after-school providers or programs, if you're from one of those yourself, if you are from a museum context, you know that many of those environments have kind of been decimated right now. Programs have evaporated, events have disappeared. The people who evaluate them also have disappeared, like many of the rest of you and all of the people who would come in and enjoy those. we had a meeting, a happy hour yesterday, the STEM evaluation topical interest group from AAA. And part of what was interesting about the group of us that came together for that happy hour was that we realized that one thing that evaluators can offer right now, and one thing that you can take advantage of if you have evaluators in your world and in your life, is DEAI kinds of work. So there are a lot of things that, because of schedules, because of budgets, because of timelines from funders and expectations to have summative evaluation data right away, that you kind of head out of the gate much faster than you would choose to if you're an evaluator. Maybe also if you're a program planner. And I think inclusion and settling into thinking about inclusive practice and what that should look like and how we could be more active and how we could be more engaged is one area where right now we have time on our hands. We can't do program evaluation. We can't do project evaluation. We can't do event evaluation. Maybe this is what we should be doing. So if you are in a pivot moment with your evaluator, maybe think about doubling down on some of what you're going to hear today, because why not, right? Part of what I've also realized over the last year is that these are not easy conversations. Talking about inclusion, particularly in relation to what people are and are not doing, is sticky. And so I actually really like quotes for that, because it's like, look, these people who are smarter and better and more active in this than me say this is what we should be doing, and what do we think about that? And so to that end, here's another one. You can only claim to be promoting engagement if all parties have a say in the rules of engagement. I love this as a reflection point. If what we're doing is public engagement, but this is our definition for doing it, how many of us are actively doing it on a regular basis? None of us are going to do it right now as much as we probably wanted to, but I like this as a rallying point to think about, okay, if this is my standard, how often do I meet it, and what are the strategies that help me do that? And so I think this is helpful to think about for conversations. Publics. So if you swim around in the public engagement literature, the term publics is going to be familiar to you. Emily Dawson built on the traditional definition of publics in her book that came out last year. Publics are usually defined in relation to the specific practices that they partake in. But we, as a public events community, as a public science community, are offering some of those practices. And so thinking about how the choices that we make allow some people to be in the light and keep other people in the shadows. And I love Jonathan's example of even the building. Like, what does the building say to people if that's where you're inviting them to come? So some of that is historic. A lot of it is historic. And let's not pretend that that's not there as part of, I think, what this literature brings to the conversation. This last one is from Daniel, and kind of my way to cue him up. So Ben mentioned that we are in the process of evaluating the Science Accelerator project. Daniel is an advisor on that project. And there was this conversation last August that for me was hugely important. I ended up recording it and going, well, Ben recorded it because I couldn't make it. And that ended up being such a gift because I basically went back and transcribed almost everything Daniel said. So if you don't yet know Daniel and you haven't heard his perspective, get ready to type because you're going to want to. This is one of the things he said during that conversation. And I appreciate this because it's not about inclusive practice. It's not about this one thing that you go and do and suddenly the world is changed. It's about relationship building, and it's about community engagement and true, authentic, meaningful relationship building. And it's slow. And part of what was so great for us, I think, or for me in this conversation, I won't speak for Ben or Daniel or any of the other folks that were on the line that day, is that we started to think about, okay, how do you think about success in this kind of an environment? Because it's baby steps, but you have to celebrate the baby steps along the way. And so how do we think about doing that? And so, oh darn it, my 7 minutes are up. So there are a lot of ways that we decided to do that. And we broke it down into what Ben referred to as these mile markers. Like, you're on the path, you're doing the work, you're thinking about things in the right way, you're doing things in ways that you hope are gonna make a difference. How do you celebrate those small successes along the way? And so this bucket of questions I like because it's not about an event. This is about the relationship building piece and showing up over time consistently with no motives other than to be a butt in a seat and to listen to what's going on. And I love that. Like, that's your starting place. You are trying to build relationships, regardless of what your event is or when it's going to be. Then we have another bucket of questions that's all about learning the histories of the communities that you hope to work with, or that you hope to partner with in some way. And so recognizing that they have their own histories just like you do, and thinking about understanding those and what they mean in relation to the way you want to build community with them, the way you want to partner with them. And then we have a cluster of questions about the actual event itself, which in this case was a festival. Part of what I like about all of these, and these all came straight out of Daniel's mouth in the course of that conversation, and they all have this reciprocity. Did people thank you for coming? Did they invite you back? Did they invite you into something else in a new way based on what was happening? And if not, what does that mean about the way that you're engaging and trying to build that relationship? So I love the idea of baby steps and celebrating the small successes, and the steps that we've taken to start to do that through this project. Daniel, I think, has come up with lots of even bigger, grander ideas for how to think about this as a community. And so this is my official handoff for what we're doing on a smaller scale with Accelerator and how it fits into the larger world of what Daniel's going to think about next.
Yikes. Thanks, Karen. I almost turned my camera off. I felt like I was turning super bright red. All right. Hi, everyone. I think I might be in a little bit of a darker place than what the tone of this conversation has been so far, but it's not business as usual for me. I think I've helped to conceptualize and co-develop, plan, lead close to 300 STEM-focused events, held I don't know how many community conversations about science and community engagement and local STEM access efforts, and organized probably another 300 community events, all of them with inclusion as a pillar. But you know what I've learned? When you really believe in the importance of representation, you lean into the work of diversity, knowing that it's not only about the color palette of the people at the table, that it's also about acknowledging elephants in rooms, leaning into that discussion while making a genuine effort at ensuring that those faces at the table also have a microphone, and that microphone needs to be turned on and turned up. That inclusion isn't a casual idea. It's an active moment-to-moment practice, and that we need to move away from wanting equity to dismantling inequities. That access and accessibility are not the same thing. And that within them, there's also diversity. That we need, that I'm done preaching to the choir. That we can't invite people to join our community, that we need to earn the right to be part of theirs. And that I'm exhausted. That this is emotional labor. And this labor takes a toll. As you can see in here. And now's not the time to put on events. It's the time to build up our endurance to see this work through, because our communities can't afford to wait for our second wind. They need us to be ready and to demonstrate our commitment to be better, to do better. Now is the time to reflect, to ask questions, to use this great pause to not talk, but to create space for listening. And we need to heal. All of us, everyone on this call, we all need to heal. So, I mean, I have a lot of creative ideas for how you can make your events inclusive. And please email me. I'm happy to jump on a phone call. I'm one of those weirdos that still loves to receive phone calls. And you don't need to announce it with a text. So if you need that information, I'll make it available. But today I don't have solutions. Today I have questions. And I don't know, maybe these are some questions you can ask of yourself and your teams when you're planning events. What is our decision-making process, and who is currently informing it? Who needs to inform it? What do we mean by inclusive? What is this event, who is this event for? Is this event so that we can pat ourselves on the back to say, look at the numbers of people who joined us? Or is this event to bring us closer to the community? Who's benefiting? Who else may benefit? Are you thinking about a segment of the population or a specific people group? Have you run your ideas by them? Are they telling us what they think and feel? How are you reacting to their thoughts and feelings? Like, check some of those boxes, but just don't stop at checking those boxes. And you know what? And know that discomfort passes, and we need to lean into that. I don't know, that's just where I'm at right now. So if you wanted me to talk about something else, Ben, I don't have it in me right now.
Thank you, Daniel. I saw a lot of supportive comments in the chat.
I'm scared to look.
Well, and I also, I feel like maybe we open this with Stacey, and there's some vulnerability with Stacey, and appreciate that, like, throughout, with pandemic or no pandemic, I've seen people get very emotionally involved in this work to the point where it's not work anymore. It's not something like you're clocking in and out of. But to take things from there, I don't want to just fill this space with my voice. Daniel, thank you for sharing your contact info too, so people can see that in the chat.
As I'm tearing up, thank you, Daniel. I think as people, we always want to feel more positive about it. And I think mentioning emotional labor is so incredibly important, because I feel like my event is my baby. And it was interesting because I realized I didn't put an evaluation question about sensory friendly hour. And I realized that part of that was because I was so terrified that I had put something out there, and I was scared of getting the kind of realistic commentary without, that's why I think I asked for generosity, where it's like, don't tell me that the gender neutral bathroom was locked. Understand that I was apologizing to people on the side of my event with tears in my eyes. Like, there's so many aspects to this that we need to think about, and it's not always positive and sunny, and we work so hard, and it's our labor of love. And so when you come to these things and we talk about these things, like, it's always just this place of this community would make me cry on a normal day. And so it's just absolutely incredible to be here. And I'm glad you were honest. It's so good to be honest and to feel like we're all safe in this space.
So one thing on my mind, and now I am taking up space, apologies, but just that right now is a time when if you were having difficulty listening or even recognizing that you need to listen better before, at this time it's exceedingly difficult. The people that you couldn't hear before, you actually technically cannot hear now, unless you make an extreme effort, or sorry, I don't want to make it sound too daunting, unless you pick up the phone and start to do some talking with people and listening. So I've there's this desperate rush right now to try to stay relevant for professionals who believe that that's their job, and that I do feel really, I mean, just is, it doesn't have to be, but it is running roughshod over and exacerbating all of the inequalities that we were already exacerbating before. So if anybody, I think the thing that I'd love to hear right at this moment is if anyone feels that they have had positive experience with trying something new in terms of listening to voices that aren't otherwise, they're really hard to hear right now. I don't know, how do we raise our...
I can speak to that a little bit too, Ben, if you want. Something I've been working on is because of the frustration that I felt with the mad dash for people to stay relevant and have really good intentions of like reaching audiences with tools and resources and just making everything available digitally. You know, like all I could think about was like the digital divide is a very real thing, but on top of the digital divide is what that digital divide does, and it just widens the achievement gap. And I don't know if people are thinking about that. And I also know how hard people work on creating these tools and resources for people to utilize, and I hate for that energy to be wasted. So I've been, and part of why I'm in this space right now, headspace right now, is because I've been working on reaching individuals that are on the ground living their everyday experience, the people that we're writing curriculum for, teachers, students, parents and guardians, social emotional practitioners. And I've been creating a series of dialogues where they are the ones creating the conversation. And so in order to do that, I've had to try to identify people all over the country that can represent a broad swath, and also have one-on-one conversations first to create that space so that they feel like they can be vulnerable and they can share openly and honestly, so that the rest of us can listen to them. And it's rough out there. It really is. But every single person that I've talked to is so grateful that somebody wants to listen to them. And though that makes me feel really good, it also makes me feel really upset that everybody else can be doing this. It's not hard. It's just effort. And you don't need an invitation to reach out. You just need to reach out. And if you are reaching out and they're not responding, it's not their fault. Science isn't inclusive. And so you need to be patient with that and keep showing up anyway. stop taking up space.
No, I found myself nodding my head a lot while you were just speaking. And I advocate for this sort of thing, but I am going to just say, like, I've not, in my personal shambles of a situation in this pandemic, I've not actually made a call like this. So, I'm just saying, I'm one of the head nodders, and I'm just calling myself out as one. So, I do have a 5-year-old. I'm talking to his teacher, et cetera, et cetera. But, I don't know that it's even effort so much as just having it present in mind as you move throughout your day. There's no reason why I couldn't take an extra part of the conversation with my son's teacher that we get 20 minutes every couple weeks and just make sure that that's not just about me or my son. At the heart of this is like kind of the basic basic skill set and basic practice that I think is, I don't know how you create something of meaning without pursuing this sort of practice. I'm wondering, I see some people starting to drift off a little bit. Jeff, do you have a way in which you'd like to, I haven't been able to really monitor the chat. So given that we have 3 minutes left, I want to make sure that. I just wanted to make sure that we haven't missed something in the chat with us talking heads.
There's been a lot in the chat. I don't know if it's possible to go through it all in a couple minutes. The chat will be saved, and what we can do is have the questions and or the commentary, depending on what people want, available on the SciEngage website. We hope that we can continue the conversations that are happening. I'm willing to, keep the meeting going, however long people want to talk. We also have a page on the Trellis site for this specific event where we can keep that discussion going. If I know not everybody signed up there, but the AAAS folks can get people there, because it obviously is a conversation that's touching lots of nerves and needs to be continued, and I'm happy to find ways to make that happen.
Could I say something?
Please.
I mean, listen to Daniel and some of the comments. I mean, I have a bit of an issue that science is not inclusive. Is science truly not inclusive, or is this the history and the history of how we share with people is not inclusive? Because in my work, especially over the last few years, is really researching and working with communities about their participation in the history of science, of their perspective, right? And it's just enjoyable. It feels good. It feels good when you share with people where they're talking about their history, when you're sharing their history with them, and how that they have a place in history. Because you're spending the time, if they don't have the information, but you're taking the time to work with them to uncover their history. That there's no such thing as primitive inventions and that kind of nonsense, and that that people have always, all peoples have always continued to be innovative and to move forward. The question is that their voices never get heard, their stories never get told, and we pretend that they don't exist, or that they only exist within our framework. So I used to say that science is not inclusive, but for me, the history of science is inclusive. It's the stories that we share about it that is not inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's my point. And the other part, we create a space for them. And Daniel talked about that. And I think it's that we're constantly having to validate them rather than, and they always have to be, they're always going through this exercise of, you know, am I with it? Am I there? Do I have a right to be at the table? When they have every right to be at the table. And we just have to continue to give them that space so that they can share that they
Yeah, it's just finishing his thing.
celebrate and celebrate the innovations, celebrate their stories, right? And but we have I mean, especially a lot of museums, you know, great work, except no respect for a lot of people and their histories and the stories that they have to tell, you know. So thank you for the space to talk.
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it. It's good to see you. I wonder, is where Jeff has suggested we could go over our time limit. I mean, which means really, if anyone feels they'd like to take the floor. Don't make me do a countdown. As much as I appreciated that. All right, we're not going to have a last word to this conversation. So we'll have to keep it going. I'm not going to plug sciencefestivals.org. That would be shameless. So I won't do it. And I cannot thank the participants that came enough, but thank you so much to Stacey, Jonathan, Karen, and Daniel. Thank you to the crew that puts these on every month too. I think we'll call it at that. And till next time we meet, hope everyone's as well as they can be.
Thanks, everyone. One last thing, if you want to join our mailing list, it's in the chats. If you want to take our survey, it's in the chats. Our next discussion will be on June 19th, if you want to mark down your calendars. So hopefully all these conversations will continue. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.